Hello and welcome to All the Things. I am Monique Dusan.
And I am Krista Bontrager, also known as Theology Mom.
And this is the show where we talk about all things related to God, the Bible, and real life.
And can you believe we've been doing this show? We have been doing this since 2019. It was like the end of our fourth season.
That's crazy.
It really is. It truly is crazy. So we are going to be doing these series for the next 6 weeks. We're calling them All the Things Rewind shows, where we're going back into the archives and pulling out some of those gems, because this is going to be new content for most people.
Yes. So we have quite a few shows that were pre-2020 when people really started to find all the things. And so we thought, you know what? This content could really be helpful to some people. Let's share it again.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad that we've picked these out. Many of the shows that we're going to be looking at have like 25 views, 50 views. Not that many people have seen it, but the content was still strong. Yeah. And so being able to share that is going to be a great thing for people, even though we are out on hiatus right now, bringing basically fresh content.
Yes. So. And tonight's show is brought to you by the Center for Biblical Unity,
the Theology Mom podcast,
Family 210 Clothing.
Yes. And our friends at Impact 360. Okay. So let's do a little setup here for the show for tonight that we're going to be replaying back. We went into the archives. We're doing show number 10. So this was my pick. Mm-hmm. This first aired in May of 2019. So it was only show 10. We barely knew what we were doing.
Yes. So this show only had like 24 views on YouTube. So we were like, hey, let's go ahead and replay this show. It is with Arlene Pellicane. She's actually an old classmate of yours.
Yeah, and from college.
Yeah.
But she's gone on to write several books. A couple of books deal with kids and social media. And I follow her on social media, and I know that she lives this out. Her oldest child just started college a couple of weeks ago.
Awesome.
And so she still has 2 kids at home. So this is all the way back from 2019. But this is a topic I'm passionate about, getting Christian parents to think about. So I really hope that you enjoy our discussion with Arlene Pellicane. Let's roll the tape. Let's get our guest on here and talk to my old college friend, Arlene Pellicane. Welcome to the show, Arlene.
So we didn't have phones and social media 20 plus years ago. We actually talked to each other all the time.
I know. I when I tell my children, like, I didn't even have a cell phone until I was 24.
That's crazy.
And I went to seminary before the internet.
Yeah.
It feels like the dark ages, but I'm so glad that you are willing to come on and talk to us. And I want to make sure that people know how they can get connected to you. We've got your website here. I want to show your book, Growing Up Social. Bob's going to get it up on the screen here. He needs like 5 arms. He's all by himself today. So there it is, that you co-authored a few years ago with Dr. Gary Chapman.
Yeah, that was a great experience, and basically wanted to reach out to families. On the cover of the book, you'll see these 2 little kids, white tablecloth, nice date. And, you know, when they grow up, when your kids grow up, you don't want them to be like texting, "You look very beautiful," you know, and the girl's like, emoji, 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 emoji. So we want more for kids in the next generation than that. And so that's what that book is about. And I think you're right that this is real life. It is God. It is the Bible, because this is impacting how we relate to God, how much we actually read the Bible. All those things are all wrapped up in this.
Very good. And I think that one of the issues and the challenges that our generation faces as being really the first parents who have had to deal with this issue.
Yeah.
And I think, just candidly speaking, there's some things that we haven't done well because I think the technology caught us a little bit off guard. And there's some things that we're having to undo.
Yep. It's very well said.
And I love your voice in this space because you're not the voice of alarm, but you are the voice of care and concern. And I think you strike a really good balance, Arlene. And I'm just super honored that you come on the show. So let's just kick it off here with a question about, we were talking a minute ago about my thought as a theologian that being connected is part of the created order. Is technology actually helping us with that? Is it helping us be more connected with one another?
And I think that's a really good question to ask. It's one we ask in Growing Up Social. So is technology bringing your family closer together, or is it pulling it further apart? So on that micro level of your family, how is technology impacting you? On the macro level of society, I think we can observe technology is probably not helping us connect. It's probably making us more in tune with our devices and less in tune with other people. Think of common courtesy. When you were like just walking down the street, it used to be if you saw someone walking down the street, you might just make eye contact and nod and maybe even say good morning. That's just the pleasantries of living with other people in a community. But today that would be like, oh, what a friendly person. They said hello. It's kind of weird because we're all walking around looking down at this. So I think as a society, technology has made us less connected with people, while we buy this because we think, oh, if we have a phone, we'll be able to Skype grandma. We'll be able to keep in touch with our high school buddies on a social media platform. And yes, you can do those things, but the majority of the time that we're spending isn't really enriching our relationships. It's more distracting it's a very shallow place. So I think on a large scale, it's not helping us. And then you think of a small scale of a family, right? And it could, a child really could be Skyping grandma. That could be happening. But you and I know that if we take the average child and we say, hey, what are you doing on your phone? They're not going to be like, oh, I'm Skyping my grandma in Alaska, right? It's like, it's not what they're doing. And so very much so, I think we should be concerned that we are lacking true connections with people and we're too connected with our devices. A lot of grandparents say, I wish my grandkids would call me, like, talk to me with their voices, because they refuse to call me. They will only text me. But that medium is so limited, because you only have so many characters and you don't get any voice inflection and you don't get the side stories and all those things you miss. And so I think that is really contributing to a lot of disconnect.
Well, I think that the social connection and the social development of children is such a big issue. I have deep concerns about kind of one of my first red flags about this as a parent. It was several years ago now, but one of our children needed to call an adult about an issue and just ask a very simple question. And it led to like this meltdown of apocalyptic proportions.
Right.
That she had to call an adult to ask a question. And I'm thinking, okay, something has gone wrong here, because when I was even in the 5th and 6th grade, if I wanted to call my friend on the phone, I had to know how to talk to an adult enough to get through the dad or the mom to say, is Sally there? Can I speak to her?
Right.
I knew how to talk to an adult and ask a question or make a request. And the fact that my child was completely unable to ask an adult a question, I thought, I have taken a wrong turn here as a parent.
It's things that we assume like, oh, our kid's going to be able to do that. But then you realize, oh my goodness, if they haven't practiced talking to an adult, if they haven't practiced, so we will make our kids, like if they want to know, we were looking for a certain item, like some robot at Walmart or something. So I told my daughter, she was probably in like 5th or 6th grade, you have to call Walmart, talk to the person and ask, do you have such and such in stock? Right. And so this was kind of nerve wracking for her, but we talked her through it. Like, you're going to get a lot of recordings at first, and then you're going to select the thing to talk to customer service or whatever. But that was good practice because there's zero risk, right? If she totally messes that up, big deal. You call again. You'll like
get another person.
You get another person. So our kids need practice. And so we as parents have to push them to that. because believe it or not, they're not getting that in everyday life.
For sure. You have to have so much intentionality. It's really, and if you're not tuned into it, it can become a blind spot. And then you wake up one day and you realize, my child doesn't know how to talk to people.
They're 30 years old. They're like, can I text them?
I'm wondering what marriages are going to be like 20 years from now. And like, how do they work out their problems? Because I don't know, you and I, Arlene, have been married a long time. We just celebrated our 25th. We've had some hard conversations in our marriage. There's been some bumps in the road. How are these people going to do that?
Maybe
and
with
that
emojis.
is a huge point. Yeah, go ahead, Monique.
So, all right, you want to ask a question?
Well, I think right now we're talking about a lot of the social implications of screen time, but what are some of the physiological implications? Like, how are we seeing changes in like a child's brain?
Yes.
Or is that real even?
It's totally real. So, your children, when they're born, when those babies are born, they have billions and billions of neurons forming. And that's why the American Academy of Pediatrics says no screen time. Ideally what you're shooting for is 2 or under, no screen time. So that brain can develop, so they can see a real apple and not just a little apple on the back of your device, so they can see different things. So they're actually crawling and moving. Think of what a baby's doing when they're on a screen. They're perfectly still, right? Just their little finger, and they're smiling. That's probably about it. So they got a little mouth action going on, eyes and finger. That's it. Whereas think of them with blocks. They're having to hold things. They're having to learn how to tactily work. So there's so much being missed developmentally if your 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old is sitting on average, they'll say statistically maybe 4 hours a day on games, YouTube, videos, etc. So if your 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old is sitting for that long every day, they're missing physical milestones. They're missing speech milestones, because the best way to learn speech is by mimicking speech with adults, with people in your life. That's how they learn. So you can give them an app and that sounds great and it's advertised to be so superior because it's so amazing. But it is the human being, whether that's a parent, a sister, a nanny, whoever, talking to you. Oh, did you like that? Oh, let's take your diaper off, honey. Oh, it's time to go to the store. All that's how that child is going to learn how to speak best, not from an app. So you see a lot of kids in speech therapy today. You see a lot of kids dealing with ADHD, and many times that can be prevented by a child simply learning these developmental things in normal life before screens came into being, right? Those things were pretty natural to learn, but now it takes effort. Like, put your iPad away, little 3-year-old, because we're going to bounce a ball. Put your iPad away, little 4-year-old. Now it's like an effort, where before kids just played automatically. So yes, there are huge developmental things happening. And the child in puberty, which is kind of, God has a sense of humor, they get another burst of brain cells. And one of the hypotheses is the use it or lose it principle. Whatever brain cells are being used in junior high, those are the ones that survive into adulthood. So if your kid's into sports, academics, reading, service, those are the kinds of things they're going to do as an adult. But if they're into playing video games, watching TV, and posting the perfect selfie, then those are the brain cells that survive into adulthood. And so we're really forming habits in our children. And that's where we have to go, whoa, wait a minute. Do I really want a 22-year-old who's like watching Netflix for 5 hours every night? Do I want their brains to automatically go into that pattern? And that's when it's really important as adults to make some unpopular decisions. Your kids are not going to go, oh, thank you for protecting my brain right now. They don't know. They're going to cry and scream, and you're going to think it's the apocalypse. But later they will thank you.
So that leads me to another question. You say like before they're 2, there shouldn't be any screen time. But then and please correct me because I'm probably going to say this wrong. One of the quotes in your book says that by the time a child is 7, they have like a full year of screen time, like 365 24-hour days of screen time. As a parent, what would you say like is the formula then? Is there a formula? Is there like, just no screen time until they're 7? How do parents navigate I don't want you to have too much screen time. I want your brain to develop.
Or, is there a balance between that and, making sure that my kid doesn't feel ostracized from the rest of the world because they don't have the gadgets that their friends have?
Mm-hmm. So to that statistic, so if your child follows the national average, then by the time they're 7, they'd have a full year of screen time. So we think like, wait a minute, I don't want my child to have that much screen time. So I know I don't want to follow averages. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, I think, provides a very good framework. And actually there's like, if you go to their website, they have a family media plan where you can like type in the age of your children. And basically you're putting in how many hours of sleep should they be getting? How much time should they be outside? How much time are they spending eating? And it kind of shows you what's left for screen time and free time. And then it helps you figure out for your home what would work. So I think that shows that intention and you're kind of working on it as a plan. But they say from age 2 to 5, ideally half an hour or less, an hour or half an hour or less, but they also recommend co-viewing because what's different is if you put your child, most of us, when we put our children and they're watching TV, we're not like, oh, fabulous. I'm going to sit right next to you and watch this cartoon with you. We think like, oh, good. We have 30 minutes to be by ourselves and to like get stuff done. And we run as far away as we can. But they recommend co-viewing. So you're like, oh, look, the color's yellow. Isn't that amazing? And then that brings value to that screen time. But most of us don't treat it that way.
So kind of adding your own commentary to it so that you're working different parts of the brain. They're not just passively receiving it. You're also engaging in verbal action so that their brain is continuing to be stimulated.
Yeah. And co-viewing, like even watching a family movie, with your 12, 14 and 16-year-old, that could be a bonding activity, a good activity. Now you've got the same quotes that you're laughing about. You've seen the same thing. That's a lot different than kids, just one kid in the living room watching this, another kid with earbuds, mom doing social media, dad watching sports. That's a totally different dynamic. So you also have to quantify like, what is this screen time that we're doing and how do we use it? And really what happens is you have very good intentions with that first child, but then child number 2 comes, child number 3 comes, child number 4 comes, or however many. And then you're like, oh my goodness, my older child's watching and I can't get my younger child not to watch. This is getting so hard. So you really do have to be super intentional about, okay, I've got this 2-year-old. Okay, we've got to wait till the 2-year-old's in nap time before the 7-year-old gets their half an hour of TV time. And you really have to plan that out and be very like on it, judicious, because that slips away so easily.
And to be honest, I've kind of migrated into a posture with our younger daughter that I'm actually more restrictive now with her than I was with her older sister. And it's hard. You have to be made of some powerful stuff in your soul as a parent.
And let me say this, Krista and Monique, that your environment is super important. So if your child has a cell phone, has a personal tablet, there's a screen in every room. I mean, how can we expect them to be like, okay, go home and I'd like you just to be on for 15 minutes. When they have all these things in their environment that say, use me, pick me up, like you've got spare time, take me. So your environment has a lot to do with it. And it's what we as parents, we have to buy into the environment first. Right?
Yeah.
So we're super dinosaur-like. So we don't have a television. We never have had cable. My kids are now high school, junior high, elementary school. So they've grown up in a home that didn't have TV, didn't have cable, that when it was screen time, it was like, oh, everyone's going to watch Tim Hawkins, the comedian, or everybody's going to watch Hoosiers. Like it was always like that. So they've grown up in that environment where the screen wasn't easily accessible to them. So now, as they have school issued iPads, junior high, school issued laptops, high school, now they have this access. And so sure, they're going to be more prone to be like, oh, let me go on YouTube and let me look at videos about things that I'm interested in, right? But they've had those younger years of having that self-control. So even though it's a battle, it's not as much of a battle. And then they don't have personal phones, personal iPads. And one thing where I know, like, okay, when they turn those devices in during the summer, they don't freak out. Like when my daughter, who's in 7th grade, will turn in her iPad next week, she's not going to be like, oh, what am I going to do all summer? And that's a good test with your kids of, okay, is this device too central in their, can I take this device and put it to bed for the weekend? And can my children survive that? And that's a great test, both for adults and for kids, to make sure, like, are we not too tied into this?
I think you bring up a good point regarding older kids and their access to screens, because they are so prevalent among all of the high school students, most of the junior high school students. What is your maybe advice or encouragement to parents who find themselves struggling in the middle of, my kid refuses to put down their cell phone, my kid refuses to, have a conversation and not text?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say to that parent, I think about my books, Parent Rising, is that whole leadership. Like, parent, as long as you are providing shelter for your child, and most likely you are paying for that phone, you're the one paying for it. So you're the one who can say, you know what, honey, I'm noticing that you are not talking with us as much. You are not as open to us as you used to be. And I really see that correlating with your phone. And you may not like this very much, but we're going to go ahead and give your phone a break for, and whatever you think, for 1 week, for 5 days, for 2 hours, because that's all your child can, whatever. But we're going to give your phone a break, and then we'll talk again. And really to have that ownership, like, I can do that. Like, a lot of parents feel like, oh, I couldn't do that, but you can. Like, you're the adult and they're the 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old. You can do that. I always remember, after giving a talk like this, encouraging parents, and this is one encouragement I would give to parents, is to collect the phones at night. And even if you have a senior in high school, and if you simply say, from the sleep perspective, 40% of kids are waking up in the middle of the night to text someone at 2:00 in the morning, and they're not sleeping. They're just on, off all night. And you wonder why they're so irritable in the morning and why they have such a hard time concentrating. So just from a sleep perspective, never mind pornography and texting and what are you doing at night, just from a sleep perspective, to say, I'm going to be collecting your phone, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so I had one dad say, I've known, big, strong man, I've known that I was supposed to do that with my daughter, but I have been afraid to, and I'm going to do it. So I think part of it is us not being afraid to be unliked, unpopular, the object of scorn for a little bit, and say, I know this is the right thing, so I'm going to collect your phone at night. I think that's a great starting place, and that will help your child tremendously. Now, they're going to be able to sleep better. They're going to have to relearn that, but they're not going to like it. They're going to say, my friends are going to think that I hate them because I don't text them back, and you're trying to ruin my life and all those things. But in the long run, you're really doing your kid a great service.
I love that. And what I actually hear you saying is that in a time of so much screen time, it really requires parents to get back into active parenting and into understanding what it really means to be a parent. Like, I always tell my friends who are parents, even though I don't have kids, like, you're not meant to be your parents' friends all the time. Like,
that's right.
Your kids will have their own emotions and can be responsible for that. And you are called to parent them. And so, yeah, I love what you're saying about, parents really stepping back into that role of parenting and not being afraid to be the bad guy, quote unquote.
Yeah.
We're going to take a short time out here from our conversation with Arlene Pellicane. We really hope that you're enjoying it. But we want to hear from our friends at Impact 360, and we will be back in just 1 minute.
Change isn't going to come just because you want it to. Change comes because you are intentionally taking steps to making that change.
I aspire to be someone who continues to build bridges with other cultures and who cultivates a community that's healthy and honoring to the Lord and life-giving.
Now, after the program, I feel like I know what my purpose is and I know what I want to do going out into the world. And had I not had this time to step back and just kind of be patient and be still and just listen, I don't think I would have had that same clarity.
In this world, it's kind of like in a scream contest. Who can scream the loudest and who's going to listen to that person yelling the loudest? And that person should be God, but he's not yelling, he's calling us. My hope going forward to interact with culture is to tell people like, hey, like, be still, listen to this guy is calling you. He's calling you home.
So appreciate the ministry of Impact 360. We were actually there twice this year, once speaking to high school students, the second time speaking to their 9-month gap year students. Such an awesome ministry to instill a historically biblical Christian worldview into young people.
Yeah, it's a great ministry. So go check them out and see if they might be helpful to you in your journey in discipling your kids. And with that, speaking of discipleship, let's go back and listen to the rest of our conversation with Arlene Pellicane. I had sent an article to Arlene that there was a study that just came out recently. I think the British newspaper tablet, I don't know what it is, Daily Mail, had a little summary of it. Let's see if Bob can get it up here. Generation of child web addicts. Youngsters are becoming so obsessed with the internet, they spend more time on YouTube than with friends as parents struggle to keep control of their online usage. And so I thought, well, is this just tabloid sensationalism? So I took the time to go actually read and look into the journal article that they were quoting. And again, it's the Pediatric American Medical Association journal. So it's a reputable academic journal. And Bob, if we can go to the graphic from the journal. Yeah, there it is. This is the study, association between screen time and child's performance on development screening tests. So let's just skip to the conclusions here. I thought it was interesting because it's exactly what Arlene's been saying for years. The results of this study support the directional association between screen time and child development. Recommendations include encouraging family media plans, managing screen time to offset the potential consequences of excess use. I'm like, well, if they had read Arlene's book a few years ago, they'd be well ahead. But I keep following these types of studies, and just time and again, they're all saying the same thing, that and we as parents need to pay attention, which kind of brings me to the question of, how do adults really contribute to the problem? Because I'm starting to think that adults are really almost more of a problem than the children, because the children are following our lead.
I'm sorry, Krista, I didn't hear your question. I was checking my texting. No, I'm joking. So that's the problem. So they did a study of 6,000 kids, and they asked, like, what's your parents' worst habit? And the majority of them said, my parents' worst habit is looking at their phone, interrupting while we are in conversation. So it is just this modeling that we are so connected with this little device that our kids feel like second fiddle to that. So we, first of all, have to say, wait a minute, whenever my child is present, I need to model to them that the human being in front of me is more important than my device. Like, my device can wait, but you can't. So I'm going to look at you. I'm going to give you eye contact, that's so important. So I think it is the modeling. I think it's much easier as an adult. Like, we hear these things and we get it, but somehow we're not translating it into a change in our lives because maybe we feel so overwhelmed. Like, how are we going to get there? We often hear things like, my kids would never, or I could never do that. And so we need to have the hope to say, wait a minute, we can change. And we've got to make those action steps very specific. We're not going to have phones at mealtime. And maybe that's all we're going to work on. Or, hey, you teenager, you're going to charge your phone outside overnight. And so am I as the adult. Maybe it's the adult that's the worst offender, right? And so we're going to charge our phones in a different room outside of the bedroom at night. So we've kind of got to get a hold of this because it really is easier. Think of us at work. They say that cyber loafing, so looking at things 60 to 80% of the time in one survey, that's what people on the job are doing. So we start out looking for something legitimate for work, right? But then you're like, oh, that's an interesting article. Oh, I can't believe that movie's coming out. Wow, those shoes are on sale. And all of a sudden you're somewhere else. And so we as adults have to work on our wandering, because it's a whole lot easier to be distracted and to say, oh, I'm busy, than to deal with your screaming 3-year-old who's having a tantrum. It's a whole lot easier to just be like, oh, I've got to answer some emails right now that are really important for work.
Yeah. And that's such a struggle. That's just a struggle for me. And I just really appreciate, we should just say that the reason we're having this special broadcast at this time is because Arlene is so committed to her family. She's like, when my kids are home, I don't do interviews. and her kids are getting off school. And this was like our last chance to get her before her kids had summer break. So I was like, all right, let's do it at 9 a.m. because
I appreciate that. Thank you.
It feeds right into what we're talking about is we don't want to just say family first. We want to make decisions and have intentionalities that match that. And I know that's my struggle too. You know, you and I, Arlene, are both like highly motivated, very goal oriented. You know, we're involved in ministry on social media for the purpose of our ministry. So we're not trying to villainize it, but we're also trying to set the proper boundaries with it.
Yeah. And it's the whole idea of purpose. You know, I wasn't on Instagram for so long because I felt like I'm the social media like moderation gal. I don't want to be like, oh, and I'm on Instagram 5 hours a day. You know, it just didn't make sense. So I just joined a few months ago. So I'm Instagram newbie, and my habit, and here it is again. So it's not like I'm so perfect or so amazing. It's just you have habits and then your brain just kind of follows them. So my habit is 5 days a week. I'll post something, make a comment. I'll look around maybe for 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm done. That's like my Instagram for the whole day. And so it's just a habit of, okay, this is my purpose. This is what I'm here for. And I do it. And I think for us, if we look at texting, email, shopping, all those things, like, what am I here to do? I'm here to get shoes. Fabulous. Get the shoes and then get out. You know, it's like, do your mission and then get out. And for us to be that strict with ourselves, because it's so easy just to let it slide, and our kids will then pick up that purpose as well, hopefully.
You mentioned Facebook, or not Facebook, you mentioned Instagram, and I automatically think about Facebook. But to me, those things are kind of archaic with like Snapchat or,
sure.
you know, all of the new apps that are coming out. How important is it that parents actually keep up to date with those things? Or is it okay that, you know, like I'm just going to monitor the time that you're on, but not really the apps that are out there?
Yeah. So much of this, I think, is the heart of the child, because no matter how much you monitor, however much you do, and those things are fine, your kid can find a way around. You know, your kid can have a burner phone that you have no idea that they have. Your kid can have 5 accounts with bogus emails with anonymous names that you had no idea they had. So they have that capability. And I think that we can't observe everything that they do. And I believe that's why it's so important from birth to 10 that their screen time is almost non-existent except for family time watching, because you're building character in that child. And a child who has character at age 10 isn't going to be like, oh, I'm 12 now, I'm going to hide things from my parents. You know, it'll go against their nature. I'm not saying that if you parent a certain way, it's going to automatically, you know, your child's going to turn out perfect if you do. No, but you have a much better chance. So yes, you can monitor. Yes, you can set it up on your phone where maybe they only get 1 hour of screen time or something, and then it shuts down, or you can disable apps after a certain time of day. And I think those are good measures for a parent to take. But most importantly, it's that heart. It's the self-control of a child. It's what they have an appetite for, a desire for. And that's what we as parents, that's discipleship, right? In the home, trying to help guide their heart to want what is good and noble and lovely and praiseworthy. And a lot of the stuff online is not.
Yeah, I just feel like trying to monitor content is a losing battle. I've kind of shifted into with our second child that I can't monitor all that. It's just easier not to have the devices.
Yeah.
And we just spend more time together as a family. And she assures me that she's the only child on the planet that has this issue. So if anyone would like to add their name in our chat box, that would be great.
Now you have proof positive through this video that I have a high school freshman who does not have a phone or social media. I have a 7th grade girl. So my freshman's a boy. I have a 7th grade girl who does not have social media or a phone. Obviously my 4th grader doesn't either, but this is weird. Right? This is weird.
Yeah.
They don't have
we
those
are the
devices.
Weird parents.
Yeah, we are weird. But guess what? If their if their friends want to text them, they use my number, and I'm totally fine with that. If my son Ethan, who's in high school, he has a Google Voice number. It's a free number you can get from Google, and so he can enter a group chat from that, and he can do that from his phone. So that's kind of a way to get around this. He's in an after-school activity, so they have a group chat. So how do they keep in touch about practice times, etc.? So that's a way that we've kind of solved that problem. So yes, your kids will be weird, but I love to say Bill Gates, he did not give his children a phone until high school. Steve Jobs did not allow iPads in his own home for his children. Like, are we seeing a pattern here?
Yeah.
So it is okay to be the weird one, because you're either going to be weird that like, oh, look, my child knows how to have a conversation with an adult and likes to read and plays an instrument. Like, okay, that weird. Or you could be like, my child's great at Snapchat, but they've been unemployed for 10 years because they can't seem to find a job, So you can pick which weird you want, but I think the former weird is better.
I think that for me, what I've noticed in my own life, because again, our generation has the benefit of, we remember life before the internet, before devices. So we know what that was like. I'm always telling my kids, like, why don't you ever call your friends on the phone, and have a real conversation? And they just look at me like, I don't know what I'm talking about. But
right. Like, people don't do that, Mom.
I know, but I that's kind of what I'm thinking. And that's actually an important skill. And what I've come to loathe in my own self, and I'm trying so hard to work on this, is mobile devices steal our little moments, is what I call them. And like, I'm sitting around getting ready for a meeting at work, and there's 5 to 10 of us all sitting around the table. And instead of asking my coworker how his mother is coming along after cancer surgery, we're just both sitting on our phones and looking at our phones. It steals those little moments together of eye contact, of connection, and bringing it back to where we started, of, if my sincere belief as a theologian that connection is part of the created order, that we as human persons were created to connect, and that mobile devices are too often a hindrance to that. Yes, theoretically, my child can call grandma, but how often does that really turn into a reality?
Yep. It's so profound, because it's how we are interacting with people. When my children were in kindergarten, that was the time to meet parents, because it's like you're all waiting at the door for your kids to come out. You're not in your car, your kids aren't walking out. You're at the door waiting for your child. And that's where we really got to know one another.
Yeah.
And so those parents became my friends. But I notice as the years go on, because now, he's in 9th grade. Now I look at that kindergarten door and it's totally different. Like, the parents are just standing, and each of them, did you lose me?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you hear me?
I hear you. We just see a green screen.
I'll just keep talking for now. So these parents, they're not talking to each other. They're on their phones instead. It's like this green screen that you're seeing from me. That you're not seeing people. They're on their phones. And what does it signal when you are on a phone? I'm busy. Don't interrupt me.
Yeah.
So people don't feel free to say like, oh, okay. Even though you're doing something totally mindless on your phone, they don't feel free to say like, okay, hey, let me talk to you, because they're embarrassed. They don't want to interrupt you. And so as a result, you get to know no one. And that's not good.
We're getting some good feedback from viewers, Arlene. There are a few people watching us right now, and we'll on the live stream. One of our viewers said that she works with college students, and they don't have phone conversations at all. They don't do email either. Texting is really their mode of communication and doing business. And, as an employer, I actually hired people. I've noticed this in the younger generation. When I instruct my subordinates to make a phone call, they'll say, well, I'll send an email. And I'm like, I kind of just asked you to make a phone call.
Right.
They struggle with it.
Yes.
A couple other viewers who I know are moms of teenagers say this is very helpful. I'm wondering, because summer is coming, what ideas you might have for families to help promote connection over screen time.
Yeah. And this is that planning thing, right? And you guys can see me again, can't you?
Bob's going to try it. There you
Okay.
are.
All right. Good. I switched cameras. Sorry. I had a little technical difficulty on the other one. Now, so for the summertime, I think the planning is key. So because if you all wake up and it's like, what are we going to do? I don't know. Okay, well, we're going to watch TV. That's what we're going to do, play video games. So it is, okay, let's put some things in the calendar that are totally non-screen related, whether it's the park, whether it's laser tag, whether it's mini golf, whether it's a basketball game, whatever. But I think putting things in the calendar so you see like, okay, we're going to go camping on Monday and Tuesday, or we're going to go for a hike on Friday. And this takes effort because you have to kind of plan it out. And obviously there are a lot of working moms and dads out there who don't have that kind of ability. And so then it's looking at the weekend. Okay, what can we do totally screen free on the weekend? If I know, okay, while I'm at work, my kids are most likely on screens most of the day, right? So it's that planning. And then maybe it's a reward system. We pay for books in our family. So you read this book, you make some money. So we don't do an allowance, we do book money. And it really helps them to say like, oh, I'd really love to read The Millionaire Next Door. Nobody wants to read The Millionaire Next Door. It's like a business book, but we want our high schooler to have those kinds of skills and just knowledge. So we pay for that. So maybe it's a book reading program. Maybe it's a list of things that need to get completed before that screen time is unlocked. I know a lot of families do that. And I think that's a great idea too.
I think that one of the biggest struggles I have, and I'm wondering how you've dealt with this, Arlene, is as much as I can try to monitor what my children are doing on screens, when during the summertime, especially when they're hanging out with their friends more, right. I don't have any idea what their friends are up to on their devices.
Yeah.
And there comes a point where I've just had to sort of turn it over to the Lord because I can't be completely neurotic about what their friends are doing. I try to encourage them to invite their friends over to the house so I can at least know their friend's character and try to know the parents. But even that is sort of frowned upon by my children and all my insistences of knowing their parents of their friends. I'm that person.
We like you. We like that person.
But I'm wondering how you've kind of wrestled through that conundrum.
Yeah. And it is kind of similar. If we see, my daughter's hanging out with this person. Oh, let's have that family over for dinner. And sometimes we think, well, that doesn't work because they have all girls and we have Ethan. And that's just weird because then poor Ethan's like, why am I staring at this girl, 9th grader? Whatever it is, right? So sometimes it is awkward and it can't be done or whatever. But as much as possible, to know who is that other parent, who is that child, what are they like? And that again, it becomes harder, I think, as your kids get older. When your kids are little, the parents, they've come, you know all that, and it's easier. And then as they're in high school, but I think that's also part of God's plan for their development is that they're growing older. They're getting kind of out of that funnel that you've put them in, real strict when they're little, like this is exactly what you have to do. And then they're making their own decisions because by the time they're 18 and go to college, they're going to pick whatever friends, are there. So they're having to learn how to pick those friends. So I think for me, it's more conversations and questions, like asking my daughter, which of your friends do you think is the kindest? Like which of your friends, are any of your friends like mean, like they're mean to other girls or they're mean to other people? And just kind of trying to figure out what's your friend circle like? And then before a play date, and I call it play date, it's not a play date in high school, but before they go to a friend's house, that you'd ask questions like, okay, what would you do if they started watching something and you knew like, wow, there's a lot of language in that. I don't think I'm supposed to be watching that. Or there's, nudity. What would you do? And kind of just talking through what would the options be. So that way, if it happened, that child would be like, oh my word, we talked about this. like my parent knows this kind of stuff. So at least those seeds are planted for how would you respond to this in the most godly manner possible? Is your kid going to make a mistake? Sure. But that's also a way that they're going to learn. Now, if you as a parent see, okay, this person is really a bad influence, like ever since my child's been hanging out with this person, they're lying, they're keeping things from me, they're disrespectful. I think as a parent, then it is that unpopular thing of, I'm sorry, but whenever you go to so-and-so's house, you kind of come back a different person. So we're going to not go to our house for the next 2 weeks. And we'll make up a excuse for your friend, to kind of save face, say like, oh, my grandma's in from out of town or whatever it is. And I got to spend time with her, but I think as a parent, you would step in then and say, this friend is not good for you.
That's good advice. And again, I want to recommend everyone, Arlene's book, Growing Up Social. And I'm also going to mention, I don't have a graphic for it, but your newest book, Parents Rising, which is really about being a leader as a parent. And I also want to commend everyone to check out Arlene's live streams. Are you doing it on Tuesdays or Wednesdays now?
I usually do it on Tuesdays.
Okay.
And sometimes it does move because of the kids' schedule, but they're typically on Tuesdays.
All right. So people can catch that on Facebook live stream. She does them in a very short and sweet, like 15 minutes. And I'm sure they're probably archived there on Facebook.
They are.
She went through her latest book recently, sort of chapter by chapter, walking people through it, almost like a book club. But Arlene is just such a voice of sanity, I feel like, in a culture that's lost its mind sometimes over this, and helping parents stand up to the peer pressure and also finding something inside themselves, which and I think Arlene would agree with me, is something along the lines of the Holy Spirit to help strengthen their souls and to really be a leader in their home. So thank you, Arlene, for jumping on.
Thank you
with
very
us.
much.
Thank you. It's been so good to talk with you both. And I'm so glad we ended on that note of the Holy Spirit, because he will help you do what you cannot do yourself.
That's
So
right.
go for
Amen.
it.
Arlene is the first person I ever met. She's probably gonna be really embarrassed for me saying this, but she was always like doing intercessory prayer ministry and stuff at Biola back in the old days, and did like prayer walks and different things. She was really the first charismatic that I ever met. And I just so admired her and have continued to watch her from afar. And it's just an honor and a privilege to have you here on the show. And just thank you so much for all that you do for families, and just being a stand in the spirit realm for families in such a powerful way. So
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great conversation. I mean, I'm so thankful that even though that conversation was a few years ago, it's still relevant today.
Yeah, it's really timeless. And we want to encourage you, go follow Arlene and her work, check out her books, super helpful content in this area. And I, like I said before at the top, she lives this out in her everyday life. And I know that this is not just a theoretical idea for Arlene. She is really committed to doing this as a component of discipleship with her kids. And with that, I want to encourage you, if you want to know more information about this episode, go check out all the archives for past shows on our awesome and amazing redesigned website, allthethingshow.com. Make sure that you are subscribed so that you can get weekly updates and sneak previews of what is coming up. And with that, we will see you next week.
Bye.